I find myself this morning facing the age-old preacher's dilemma. What do you say to the saved? What do you say? What can I say to you this morning that somehow you haven't already heard? What can I tell you this morning that somehow you don't already know? What do you say to the saved? Here you are. I don't see any unfamiliar faces. You're here week in, week out. What do I say? What does anyone say on a morning like this? I think it's good this morning to go back and have a look at the first Easter proclamation, at the first announcement of the resurrection. And it wasn't said, "The Lord is risen." I'm not sure how much they understood that. What they said was, "The Lord is alive." Hear that again. The Lord is alive. And that's what they knew. You know, when you look back at them, they didn't have any knowledge of resurrection. They didn't have any theology. They didn't have the New Testament. They didn't have the writings of the fathers. They didn't have 2,000 years of church history and tradition such as we do. They didn't have anything. All they had was Him. And that was enough to begin with, and it ought to be enough for us today also to begin with. They didn't understand much. You know, we like to poke fun at the disciples and talk about their ignorance and their hardness of heart and how slow they were to learn things, but things happened after the resurrection. Things happened quickly and dramatically. But think for a minute about where they had been, about what they had gone through. Group of semi-educated businessmen, fishermen, who take up with this teacher. And they spend with him 3 years, traveling through the countryside, walking through towns and villages, listening to him, being taught by him, being informed by him, and gradually, over time, they grew into an awareness that, hey, maybe he's someone different. Maybe this is the Messiah. Maybe this is the one we've been waiting for and staking all our hope in. Maybe this is the one. And they grew in that knowledge and that certitude and seemed to come, by the time we get to the Passion stories, to an awareness that this indeed is the Messiah. This is the Christ, the one we've been waiting for. And then all of a sudden, in a terrible sequence of events, he's gone, taken from them. Can you imagine how confused and alone and frightened they had to feel at that point? Can you just imagine? They had come to believe in him, to stake all their hope and their trust in him. And then all of a sudden he was gone. They didn't understand that. Easter Sunday morning, they only understood one thing. They understood that he was alive. Strangely, wonderfully, incredibly, he was still alive. And that made everything different. That made everything new. That made everything so vital. And the transformation that you see in them from that morning to just a few weeks later, when the Acts of the Apostles opens up, the transformation among them is incredible. They became supermen, if you will, pillars of strength, the foundation of everything that we know and we believe and we trust. It all comes from them. It all comes from what they knew that one morning, that their friend was alive. That's all that mattered. That's all that they knew. That's all that they understood. And that was enough. That ought to be enough for all of us as well. Simply to know that in spite of it all, in spite of all the trials and tribulations that we go through, in spite of all the ups and downs, he is alive now and here with us now. And that makes all the difference. He's alive. That's what we believe. That's why we're here, week in, week out, because we know that. In spite of everything that we don't know, and we don't know plenty, we do know that he's alive and that he's here and that he's with us and guiding us and forming us and making us bit by bit into his own. That's enough. That's all we need to follow the road that he calls us to follow. That's all we need, just to know that he's alive. And if we believe and if we know within our depths that he is alive, that makes us somehow alive as well. That gives us reason to live, reason to hope, reason to be fully alive. That's what he calls us to, fullness of life. Not the half-lives that we see so many people living now. Everyone we meet, so many people are just members of the walking dead, living lives of desperation, of uncertainty, not knowing who they are, what they are, just going through the motions because they don't know what else to do. Somehow, our knowledge that he's alive and that because he's alive, we're alive, somehow that knowledge has to be passed on to everyone we meet, to everyone we know, to let people know that there is a reason to be here, that there is something to cling to, that there is something to hope in, that there is something more than just this routine day in, day out existence that so many people suffer with. Can we let people know about that? Can we testify with the witness of our lives that he is still alive, and that it matters, and that it makes all the difference? Somehow, we have to communicate to everyone what we know and what we believe. And that's when we start scratching our heads and saying, well, what do I know? What do I believe? How can I take hold of that? How can I make that real in my life? And it is difficult. It does get confusing. I think, for an example, it's good to look at St. Peter. St. Peter in the Gospels is something of a mixed bag. Bold and impetuous, always getting himself in trouble, always seeming to put his foot in his mouth, but he's always there. Until the Passion stories. And then he's kind of strangely silent. We don't see much of him, and what we do see doesn't look so good. But after the resurrection, look at what happened to him. It's amazing. The transformation in him is just beyond words. This stubborn, impetuous man emerges very early, if you read church history, emerges very early as a pillar of strength, as a steady guiding hand who was able to pilot the early church through some very, very difficult waters. And he did so with grace and with dignity and with this knowledge in him that, God, where did it come from? What did Peter know? What did he believe? What was his experience of the risen Lord, and how did that change him? Again, when we look at the Gospels, the Passion stories, Thursday night, he makes his denials and goes off weeping bitterly into the night, and we don't see him again. He's not there for the trial. He's not there when Christ is before Pilate. He's not there when Christ is before Herod. He's not there when Pilate presents him to the crowd and they say, away with him, crucify him. He's not there on the way of the cross. He's not there at the crucifixion. He's not there at the burial. He's gone. He's gone. But Sunday morning, there he is, with the others, strangely silent and waiting. And you have to ask yourself, why was he there? He shouldn't have been. Given what we know about him, given what we know about his personality, given what we know about his temperament, he had no business being there. If that's the Peter that I know, he would have been too embarrassed, too ashamed to show his face before the others. But he was there, silent, strangely silent, and waiting. That tells me that he knew something. That tells me that he must have known something. Somehow within him, There had to be an incredible experience, first of all, of forgiveness. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been there. And there had to be somehow some knowledge within him that the story wasn't over, that there was still more to come. Something tells me he knew that. Something tells me that he knew that very, very deeply and profoundly. All of a sudden, there's a knock at the door, and incredible news that they had been to the tomb and found it empty. Without a word, off goes Peter, running to the tomb. With him, St. John. First question, how did he know where it was? He wasn't there. How did he know where it was? He went running to it. John, of course, outruns him, gets there first, and does what I think all of us would do. Stops, takes a peek. Not Peter. Here we see a bit of the old Peter that we know and that we love so much. Straight on in. Not stooping, not stopping, but barreling right in, because he knew. He knew, somehow. And he was going in to confirm what he knew. That's got to be enough for us as well. If that was able to transform him and turn his life around the way it did, that has to be enough for us as well. Peter knew. So do we. Deep within our depths, deep within everything that we are, in spite of all of the trials and tribulations of our lives, in spite of all the difficulties that we somehow pass through, we know deep down inside. That's why you're here, week in, week out, because you know. What do you say to the saved? You just say, I know. That's all. That's all you need. You just know. And somehow that becomes enough, because if what we know begins to creep into everything that we think and everything that we are, it takes hold of us and transforms us and leads us deeper and deeper and deeper into where we ought to be. And that's what we take to the walking dead among us. That's what we take to those who are struggling and full of despair and full of hopelessness. We just let them know what we know. That's all. I had a parishioner years ago who had a really, really difficult life, a lot of troubles, a lot of difficulties. She was a mess. And she started, for desperation, started going to church every week, and something happened. She just caught fire, and everything in her clicked, and everything fell into place, and her life just became incredible. And one day a friend of hers approached her and said, I don't know what you have, but I want it. That's how you do it. That's how we let people know what we know. We just live it. We let it so take hold of us and transform us that people somehow know that there's something in us that they want and that they need. That's how we do it. Great story also about St. Francis, whom of course you know I'm partial to. One day he took one of his young novices and said, I'm going to go into Assisi and preach. Why don't you come with me? Well, the young novice was all excited. I'm going with Francis himself. We're going to go into Assisi and preach. So they walked to the outskirts of the town, walked through the town, got to the end, turned around, walked back, went back to their monastery, and Francis never said a word. Not a word. Well, the young brother was crestfallen. I thought we were going to preach. Francis said, we just did. That's how you do it. That's how we do it. We don't have to talk about it. We just have to live it. We just have to be who we are. We just have to know what we know and let that form us and shape us and take us where it ought to take us. We know, don't we? That's why we're here. That's why we're here. The Gospel of St. John ends with a magnificent, magnificent story. Again, Peter, the central focus of it. It's the day of the resurrection, or close to that time, and Peter suddenly says, I'm going fishing. In other words, I'm going back to my boat. back to my nets, back to what I know, back to what's safe for me. And the others say, we'll go with you. Again, how much do they know? How much do they understand? It had to grow. But so there they go, back to what's familiar, back to what's safe, and all of a sudden there's a stranger on the shore saying, come and have some breakfast. And he's telling them, it's over. You can't go back. From now on, everything's new, and everything's different. From now on, you're with me. From now on, you know. And that has to make everything different. That has to make everything new. And there's this incredible, incredible conversation that takes place between Christ and Peter. Simon Peter, he says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Listen to the unspoken understanding that goes beyond the words, that passes between them. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. 3 times he asks him to counter the 3 denials. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. That's where we are on Easter, on every day. Knowing what we know and knowing that he knows it too. He knows us. We just need to know him. Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. That's our Easter proclamation. That's how we make every day Easter. That's how every day we bask in the light of his presence and the glory of his risen life, knowing what we know and knowing him too. Every day should begin with that prayer. Every day should be Easter, should begin with that realization. Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Yes, Lord.